The biggest lie in modern science is often hidden in a single, quiet word: gradual. We are taught from childhood that the Earth is a slow, sleepy machine. We are told that valleys take millions of years to carve through solid rock. We are told that mountains rise at the pace of a growing fingernail. This is called uniformitarianism, the belief that the present is the key to the past. But what if the history of our planet isn't a slow crawl at all? What if it were a sudden, violent, and terrifying sprint? Most critics today dismiss the story of Noah as a local event or a myth. They suggest a small river in Mesopotamia overflowed its banks. They say ancient people were simply too uneducated to understand geography. But the local flood theory doesn't hold water, literally or logically. If the flood was local, why spend a century building a vessel the size of a battleship? Why take birds on board? They could have simply flown over the next hill. Why take every kind of animal if the rest of the world were perfectly dry? And why do we find sea creature fossils on the highest peaks of every single continent? Today, we are performing a forensic investigation on whether the flood of Noah's time was a global or local event. We are looking at the evidence for a day when the Earth literally unzipped. We are debunking the gradual myth and solving the impossible journey of the kangaroo. This wasn't a regional storm in a desert. It was the total, violent reset of a planet, the myth of the slow crawl. To understand why the flood had to be global, we have to look at the rocks. Modern geology relies on the geologic column, the idea that rock layers are a clock. They say each layer represents millions of years of slow sediment buildup. But this theory has a massive physical problem that critics hate to discuss. It is called a polystrate fossil. In coal mines and rock faces across the globe, researchers have found fossilized tree trunks. These trees stand vertically through multiple layers of rock. According to standard secular geology, those layers represent vast eons of time. Think about the logic required to believe that. How does a tree stand upright for 500,000 years without rotting away? How does it stay standing while the world slowly builds up dust around its base? It is biologically impossible for a tree to remain upright for that long. The tree would have fallen, decayed, or been eaten by insects. The only explanation is that the tree was buried by all those layers rapidly. It had to happen in a matter of days or weeks, not millions of years. As John Whitcomb and Henry Morris argued, these layers aren't a clock of time. They are a record of a massive, high-energy catastrophe. The Earth's strata aren't a slow build-up. They are a massive, global mud dump. When you look at a canyon, you aren't looking at millions of years. You are looking at the debris left behind by a world being torn apart. The fountains of the great deep. Genesis 7:11 gives us a technical detail that most people gloss over. It doesn't actually start with rain. It says the fountains of the great deep were broken up first. This is the unzipping of the Earth's crust. Imagine the Earth's surface ripping open like a giant, pressurized seam. We can actually see the scar of this event today on our ocean floors. It is called the Mid-Oceanic Ridge. It is a 40,000-mile-long crack that circles the entire globe. It looks exactly like the stitching on a giant planetary baseball. When that crack opened, subterranean water and magma didn't just leak. They exploded under incredible pressure from beneath the crust. Superheated water shot into the upper atmosphere like a global geyser. As it reached the cold upper air, it condensed and fell back as torrential rain. But the real flood wasn't just falling from the sky. It was rising from the bottom up. As the tectonic plates shifted rapidly, the ocean floor was pushed upward. The ocean basins became shallower, and the sea had nowhere to go but over the land. This is why we find marine fossils, clams, whales, and fish, on the peaks of the Himalayas. Secular scientists say the mountains grew slowly over millions of years with the fossils in them. But the fossils aren't just there. They are found in mass graveyards. We find millions of sea creatures buried in a closed position, meaning they died instantly. They were smothered by mud before they even had time to react. The water didn't just rise, it surged in tidal pulses across the continents. Engineering the impossible, the Ark. Let's talk about the vessel itself. Skeptics often mock the Ark as a floating bathtub that couldn't survive a storm. But when you look at the dimensions given in the Bible, a different picture emerges. The Ark was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. This is a 6-to-1 ratio, the exact ratio used by modern shipbuilders for stability. In 1993, a world-class ship research center in South Korea studied these dimensions. They found that the Ark's proportions were nearly impossible to tip over. It could have survived waves over 100 feet high. It wasn't designed for speed. It was designed for survival in a high-energy environment. And then there is the question of space. Critics ask how millions of species could fit on one wooden boat. But the Bible doesn't say species, it says kinds. A kind is a broader biological category, similar to the family level in biology. You don't need 200 types of dogs. You only need 2 animals with the genetic code for dog. From those 2, you get every wolf, coyote, and dingo we see today. The Ark didn't need to carry millions of animals. It only needed a few thousand kinds to reboot the Earth's biodiversity. Even the largest dinosaurs start out as eggs no bigger than a football. Noah didn't need the 50-ton adults. He needed the juveniles. The Ark had the volume of 522 standard railroad stock cars. That is more than enough room for the animals, the food, and the family. The post-flood migration, the kangaroo problem. This is the gotcha question that every skeptic loves to throw at believers. If the Ark landed in Turkey, how did a kangaroo get to Australia? They imagine a pair of marsupials hopping across the Pacific Ocean. It's a miracle or it's a lie, they say. But they are ignoring the geological reality of a post-flood world. When the flood ended, the Earth was in a state of tectonic and climatic chaos. The oceans were warm from the volcanic activity of the fountains of the deep. The land was cold and covered in volcanic ash that blocked out the sun. This is the perfect recipe for a singular, massive ice age. For several centuries after the flood, massive glaciers formed at the poles. As the water was locked into ice, the sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet. This exposed land bridges that do not exist today. Australia was not an isolated island back then. It was connected to Asia by a landmass known as the Sahul Shelf. Animals didn't need to swim. They simply migrated along these corridors. They followed the vegetation and the shifting climates away from the Ark's landing site. As the Ice Age ended and the glaciers melted, the sea levels rose again. The land bridges were swallowed by the ocean, locking the animals in Australia. The kangaroo problem isn't a failure of the Bible. It's a failure to understand history. Uniformitarianism versus the Grand Canyon. If you want to see the global flood in action, you look at the Grand Canyon. The secular story says the Colorado River carved that canyon over millions of years. That is a little bit of water over a long time. But the physical evidence suggests a lot of water over a little bit of time. If a river carves a canyon slowly, it leaves behind a wide, meandering valley. But the Grand Canyon shows signs of catastrophic drainage. It looks like a giant dam breach occurred. Post-flood, massive inland lakes were likely trapped behind natural earthen dams. When those dams failed, a wall of water hundreds of feet high rushed through the soft sediment. It didn't take millions of years to carve the canyon. It took a few weeks. We saw this happen in miniature in 1980 at Mount St. Helens. A mudslide carved a little Grand Canyon, 1/40th the scale, in just one day. It created layers, canyons, and river systems in hours, not eons. If a small volcano can do that in a day, imagine what a global flood did to the Earth. Uniformitarianism is a philosophy, but catastrophism is a reality. The global echo, 200 legends. If the flood was just a local event in Iraq, why does everyone on Earth remember it? Anthropologists have catalogued over 200 distinct flood legends from around the world. These stories aren't just similar, they are nearly identical in their core structure. The Aztecs in Mexico tell of a man named Nata and his wife Nena, who survived in a boat. The Chinese tell of Fuxi and his family, who survived a great flood in a giant gourd. The Greeks tell of Deucalion, who built a chest to survive a deluge sent by Zeus. The Aborigines of Australia, the tribes of the Amazon, the ancient Hawaiians. They all speak of a global catastrophe, a chosen few, and a vessel of survival. If the flood was local to Mesopotamia, why do the Incas have a story about it? There is no local explanation for a global memory. The only reason every culture has a flood story is that every culture comes from the survivors. We are all descendants of the 8 people who walked off that ark. The stories changed over time as they were passed down, but the core truth remained. The world was once judged, and only one family was saved. The final proof and the purpose. The evidence for a global flood isn't hidden. It is staring us in the face. It is in the great unconformity that stretches across the continents. It is in the closed valve fossils found on the tops of mountains. It is in the Polystrate trees that defy the millions of years narrative. The local flood theory is an attempt to make the Bible small and safe. It is an attempt to fit the Word of God into the box of human philosophy. But God's judgment wasn't local, and neither was His mercy. The flood was a total reset, a moment when the gradual became catastrophic. It serves as a permanent monument to the fact that our planet has a history of judgment. But it also serves as a monument to hope. The Ark was a door to a new world. When you look at the rock layers today, don't see a clock of death. See a record of a world that was washed away to make room for us. The evidence is solid, the science is consistent, and the truth, like the Ark itself, is designed to survive the storm. Noah's flood was global, and the rocks will never stop crying out the proof. Hope you enjoyed this topic. What are your thoughts? Are you convinced it was a global flood, or still think it was a local flood? comment below. Please subscribe, like, and come back to the Gospel Evidence for more biblical stories around facts, myths, and faith.